And now what we're going to do is we have a panel of your peers, and we'd like to have a conversation about what that is as a lived experience in the ground. And so that will take roughly an hour. We have a series of questions that I'll be posing to our various guests who are sitting with me on stage. Following that, just so that you know, we take it even further. It is no longer governance in general. It is no longer inside the door. It is no longer at the ground level. It is your board. And what does this mean for you? And we have a facilitated process that we will lead you through that you will be walking out of here this afternoon with today having meant something very real and very concrete for you. So with that, what I would like to do, however, is begin by introducing you to the members of our panel. And so to my extreme left, so that means it's your extreme right, Edith Dumont, who is the Director Conseiller des Écoles Publiques de l'Est de l'Ontario. Beside Edith is Bill Hall, Chair of the London District Catholic School Board. Beside Bill, Kathy Abraham, Chair of the Kawartha Pine Ridge District School Board. Martha Rogers, Director of Upper Grand District School Board. And closest to me, Joanne Lacombe, Chair of Conseil des Écoles Catholiques du Centre-Est. So we're going to have a conversation, and we're going to let you eavesdrop onto our conversation. Just so that you know, the conversation will flow between English and French. I recommend that what you do is keep the headsets on so that it becomes a comfortable flow for you. And with that, let me begin. So hi there.
No pressure.
No pressure, no pressure. I want to start out with what I think is just the most obvious question to begin with, and this is going to be directed to the chairs. Bill, you've been a chair for a while, 12 years. Exactly, Joanne? For
5 years.
For 5 years, the chair of the board?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and yep. Kathy for?
I've been a trustee for 13 years, and this is my second year as chair.
Absolutely. So what we have is a really nice blend. So here's the question. What's the one thing you know now that you wish you had known when you first became chair? And Bill, I'm going to start with longevity.
Yeah. Must be the white hair. The one thing that I wished I'd known when I became chair, actually how to become a chair. When you first become a chair, and that was a number of years ago. I've been a trustee for over 30 years, so when I first became chair, it was 20-something years ago, and it was learning how to do that, how to figure out that governance that was in place at the board at that time, and how to work with directors, how to work with your fellow trustees. There were 12 of us in the board at the time, and so it was getting to know everybody, really. It was a real learning experience, and then trying to be the best chair that you possibly could be. So in the beginning, it was really just about learning how to be a chair. Now, as the years go by, you get better at it, hopefully, and so it becomes totally different than when you first became a chair.
Okay, good, good. Kathy, do you want to jump in?
I will jump in. And I thought a long time about this question because my experience is much different. When I was first asked to do this, I thought I wanted to call this long-time listener, first-time caller. Because as, if you listen to talk radio, they always have that person that calls in and says, I've been listening to you a long time, and here's what I think you should do. And so as a trustee for 11 years, before I ran for chair, I've had a whole different experience of that. But the one thing I have to say that was very surprising to me, in the most delicate way possible, is how much hand-holding there is. I'm not one that requires my hand to be held, and I was surprised by the number of my colleagues, which was, I will have to say, surprising to me, that needed the constant reinforcement. And I found that very surprising. And not necessarily in a bad way. I mean, it just is what it is. We're all different. Our boards are all different. I think that's one of the big things about this whole conversation is that, you know, whatever I say, whatever my colleagues here say, my board is completely different. I have a different culture. We have different ways we've done things. We have different history. We are different. And not to say it's better or worse, but we're different. And so it was surprising to me, the degree of, I'm just going to very nicely call it hand-holding.
Okay. Before I go to Joanne, can I just take that one step further? So you'd been at the board table for a while.
Yeah.
Suddenly pulled on this mantle. What kind of a, you know, how did it look different sitting at this end versus through this lens?
So I had a lot of experience chairing other things.
Okay.
For over 20 years, sat on a board in my municipality where we managed a community hall. So while I live in a very small village, it was a big job. We had a sizable budget, all of those things that we deal with as trustees, but in a much smaller way. So I kind of had an idea about the value and the importance of governance. I'm a huge person about governance, about this is my job, this is your job, and never the twain shall meet. And I think that's really important. And so when I became chair of the board, there was nothing about sitting at the front of the table that surprised me. Okay. I knew what I was doing. I had done this before, but not in this context. I knew how to run that meeting. I knew the value of following our protocol, our policies, our process, all of those things. But it was managing those interpersonal relationships that was the most interesting to me, that it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. Yeah.
Okay, good, thank you. Joanne, et vous?
Moi, de mon côté, juste une correction, je suis conseillère depuis 5 ans, puis je viens juste d'être élue comme présidente depuis le mois de décembre. Donc, c'est tout nouveau pour moi, mais j'étais vice-présidente 2 ans et demi auparavant. Je pense que la seule chose que je pourrais apporter comme suggestion, c'est peut-être la peur aussi. Donc, lorsque tu rentres dans un poste d'envergure de cette façon-là, on a peur de poser peut-être des questions, on a peur de peut-être démontrer les mauvaises choses. Donc, il ne faut pas avoir peur parce qu'on est bien entouré de notre directeur d'éducation, on est bien entouré de nos collègues aussi, nos conseillers scolaires qui sont là, qui ont voté pour toi aussi dans le poste. Donc, je pense que c'est important pour nous de pouvoir s'assurer de ne pas avoir cette crainte-là, de poser des questions et d'y aller une journée à la fois pour pouvoir entreprendre le mieux qu'on peut faire.
Okay. I'm going to do a follow-up. Sorry you didn't know about this question. Based on what you just said, though, were any of you prepared, or Dominic talked about the importance of training chairs. Did any of you have the luxury of receiving any kind of training or preparation? Joanne?
Je pense de mon côté, en étant vice-présidente pendant 2 ans et demi, c'est la façon de pouvoir me former de cette façon-là. Donc, je pense que ça nous a donné la question de la relève était là. Les gens étaient au courant également que je voulais le poste à la présidence. Donc, je pense faire une relève de ce côté-là, c'est toujours facile de pouvoir le faire. Mais également, mon président, anciennement Denis Poirier, a été une personne clé pour moi aussi parce qu'il m'incluait dans tout ce qu'il faisait comme président. Donc, dès le début, il m'invitait dans des rencontres, des fois qui étaient peut-être juste pour les présidents, mais qui me tenaient au courant. Il me téléphonait à chaque fois qu'il y avait une rencontre pour m'indiquer qu'est-ce qui se passait. Donc, de cette façon-là, j'ai eu ma formation informelle comme telle avec lui. Donc, ça m'a beaucoup aidé.
As a mentor.
Comme un mentor, oui.
Oui. Kathy, what about you?
I'm going to say no. It is interesting. I had served as vice chair for 2 years, but many, many years ago I was served as vice chair. And our board being vice chair does not mean that you're necessarily going to be chair. It's that's a different job. It's not about succession. But again, that's the culture of our board. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're automatically going to step up. But I had served as vice chair. So I would say that there was no real, training, right? And I think that's actually kind of a mistake. I think that, I sometimes will use this analogy. So we all win the lottery, and I'm in the same lottery pool as my vice chair, and we decide that we're going to take our $60 million and get out of here, and there's nobody there.
Yeah.
Perhaps it has the background. And so we should be thinking about that more.
Succession, good. Bill, you've had a number of different opportunities. Do you remember back, was there any kind of formal way of preparing you for that role?
Well, it was a long time ago, and I am getting older, so it's hard to remember back that far. But again, I agree, that I was vice chair at the time as well, and that's a learning experience in itself. And if your chair is good, and ours was good, they did involve you in everything that you did. There was agenda setting and all those kind of things. So you did learn from that. Plus, our Trustees Association had different seminars that you could attend, and they, you know, how to become a good chair. I mean, it's different moving up from being a vice chair to being a chair, because now you are the voice of the board. You are who's out there, who the board sees. And so there's a big difference between being vice chair and chair. And that, again, becomes another learning experience for you that first time around.
Yeah.
But I think you do get better at it the more you do it. So.
Okay, good. So a lot of it is by practice and
Right.
essentially osmosis. I want to ask another question. I want to now focus on the chair and director of education relationship. We've heard all morning about how important that relationship is, and the fact that the director and the chair work together as a team, and that's not something that happens by being passive, that we need to work at it. So I'd like to know, you know, what have you actually done to strengthen that relationship? And Edith, did you mind if I start with you?
Je suis très contente de répondre à cette question-là que je trouve fondamentale. Tous les directeurs de l'éducation devraient pouvoir y répondre avec facilité parce que c'est vraiment le cœur d'un fonctionnement optimal pour un conseil scolaire. Je suis très heureuse aussi malgré le fait que je suis directrice d'éducation seulement depuis 4 ans, que je ne contredirais pas des gens comme Dominique Giroux ou comme le spécialiste que nous avons eu ce matin, parce que je crois que la clé d'un certain succès, c'est définitivement rattaché à la qualité de la communication que je qualifie sur 2 pôles. L'ouverture de la communication et la structure de la communication. Si je parle d'ouverture, ce que je veux dire spécifiquement, c'est la capacité de la direction de l'éducation, de la présidence et de la vice-présidence d'échanger non seulement sur les points forts de son conseil scolaire, mais sur tous les défis que nous rencontrons pour que ça devienne notre histoire. Et quand je dis structuré, nous avons des agendas tellement remplis que si ce n'est pas structuré dans le temps, il est très facile de perdre une qualité au niveau de la communication. Alors, pour être très concrète, je rencontre la présidente et la vice-présidente 1 fois par semaine de 2 à 3 heures pour faire des choses comme préparer l'agenda ensemble. Est-ce que, comme directrice de l'éducation, avec mes surintendants, je suis en mesure de fournir toute l'information importante que les conseillers scolaires auront besoin dans une prochaine réunion? Alors, je trouve que c'est une communication qui repose sur une discipline corporative.
So you're working together, absolutely. Joanne, from your perspective?
J'aimerais, oui, juste ajouter, parce qu'on ne s'est même pas parlé de nos réponses, mais moi aussi, la communication, c'est important de pouvoir établir une bonne communication. Puis je les vois à 3 niveaux. Moi, je vois une communication qui est ouverte. Donc, vraiment s'assurer d'avoir cette liberté de pouvoir se parler, de se sentir à l'aise, de pouvoir se parler également. Avoir une communication qui est honnête aussi. S'assurer que j'ai toute l'information, m'assurer que je lui donne à mon directeur d'éducation toute l'information qu'il a besoin, parce que moi, je peux entendre des choses également. Donc, je pense que l'honnêteté dans la communication est importante. Et également, je crois aussi, je reviens souvent à ce fait-là, mais de ne pas craindre l'information ou la façon qu'on va parler à son directeur d'éducation. La relation que j'établis avec cette personne-là, je veux m'assurer qu'elle puisse vraiment se sentir à l'aise si quelque chose ne va pas bien ou s'il y a une mauvaise nouvelle à m'annoncer, bien, qu'il me le dise tout de suite, parce que je suis une personne qui ne réagira pas de façon brute, comme on pourrait dire, mais au moins commencer à travailler ensemble, dire « OK, il y a une situation qui se passe, tu n'as pas eu peur de me le dire, voici comment on va le travailler », puis c'est juste du respect. Moi, au bout de la ligne, c'est le respect de son rôle comme directeur d'éducation, le respect que lui me donne à moi envers mon rôle comme conseiller scolaire, puis comment est-ce qu'on peut faire cette communication plus honnête et très ouverte de ce côté-là. Pour moi, c'est la base de tout.
Okay. And sometimes it gets tested along the way.
C'est certain, c'est
Oui,
certain. Il n'y a
oui.
pas de place parfaite. Il y a
Yeah.
toujours des choses difficiles, des décisions difficiles aussi à prendre. Donc, oui, ça peut devenir des fois des discussions écorcées.
Yeah. Kathy?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to say that in order to strengthen the relationship, you should not be sitting up here talking about your director when the director's in the room, unless you haven't actually talked to him about what you're going to talk about while you're sitting up here. So I did that. So I'm hopefully not going to say anything that's a big surprise. I go back to the aspect of my particular situation and that I've been doing this job a long time. I was first elected as a trustee in 2003, but I've been involved in the school board since 1997, which Dominic reminded us of this morning was the formation of school councils, because that's when I first got involved. And I do tell this story, and I laughed when the speaker this morning talked about the chair being able to say, excuse me, there's a meeting going on, because that's my first memory of our director, who at that time was a principal, and I was a regional school council chair, and I had to say, excuse me, there's a meeting going on, because it was my meeting and he was a guest. and I don't think I've changed much since then. I think that that's still the way it is. I think it's about trust. I trust that he's going to tell me the things I need to know to do my job. I trust that it's going to be accurate. I trust that he's going to not sell me down the river, and I hope, trusts the same thing of me. That I'm going to talk to him and be honest and open and forthright about what's happening at the board, about what my colleagues are thinking, about what the importance is, about where we're going, and how this is looking, or how this issue is playing out, and what do we need to do to help them make better decisions? How are we going to do that together? The communication piece is huge, but you have to trust each other. And I think we do have the benefit of knowing each other through various, principal, superintendent, director, and me being my role previously, and then being a trustee. So I think it's constantly, you do those checks to make sure that you're telling each other everything you need to know to do your job. Otherwise, neither one of us can do our job effectively.
Sure. And that notion of trust, we all acknowledge that trust is important, but trust is earned.
Absolutely.
And trust is earned over time. Bill, do you want to add anything to this?
Well, I think, it's been brought out, and I think that the only thing you can add is that communication is a huge word here.
Yeah.
Communication, communication, communication. There shouldn't be any big surprises between the chair and the director. That should be, you should respect each other, you should trust each other, and for myself and our director, much as I hate saying this, we're in constant communication. It's almost a daily communication effort to make sure that I'm aware of what's going on, and then if I have some things that I want to talk to her about, to make sure that she is aware of what's going on, so that we both understand what's going on with the board, so that I can be a better chair and communicate that to my board of trustees
Your
as well.
trustees, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Martha, anything to add?
I go right back to where it begins when the person is first elected as a chair. I meet with the chair, much like my colleagues, to clarify our roles. I think this morning the phrase was rules of engagement. And then, because chairs are usually busy people who often have businesses and families of their own, I talk about what's probably the minutia, but when would you like me to communicate with you and how?
Oh, great.
Do you like emails? Do you like text messages? Do you like phone calls? I do believe that we need to spend a lot of time together, so I sort out with the chair in what way can I fit into the chair's life in order that we spend that amount of time together. Like my colleagues and as the trustees have said, I try to ensure there are no surprises for the board chair, so I'm very transparent. If anything, I over-communicate. As I was listening this morning, thinking about what is strategic and what is operational, I probably tell the chair far too much about too much stuff. But I figure the chair can always say to me, I don't need to know that. I do the usual things about meet and sort out the agenda with the chair and the vice chair. We develop it in advance, which other people do. I make sure that the chair knows about local, regional, and also provincial issues.
Okay, excellent.
Because the chair is often called upon out of the middle of nowhere by the media. Such and such has happened in we're OPSPA. So OPSPA, TJ has sent out the following articles. So I take a look at those articles, then I call the chair and let him, it's a him right now, know about what's in the articles if he hasn't had time to read them, and what he might say if he's asked.
Excellent.
I make sure the communications officer has notes written out for the chair if he's called after a board meeting to have to give a comment. I know there aren't to be emotions. I heard this morning about emotions aren't to arise in the boardroom. When somebody says, I feel strongly, the comment was made about somebody cringes, or if somebody says, I completely disagree with that, then I know there could be some emotions. So I try to help my chair because even the most experienced chair can get flustered
Yeah.
when emotions start to run higher in the boardroom. So just little boring things like I make sure the speakers list is in order so the chair doesn't by accident, when things are running a little bit high, ignore somebody or someone's little paw is up to be recognized and the chair by accident doesn't see it. So, and I try to pass little notes and give advice along the way. Sometimes, regrettably, in boards there is a bit of divisiveness.
Yes.
So I'm not going to pretend that we don't ever have any in our board. If I pick it up, which normally I do, I'm like Mother Martha, because I've been around for so long, that people tend to call me and tell me stuff. I try to let the chair know, while maintaining the confidence of the trustee, if there is divisiveness within the board that might ambush him at the next board meeting. So some of what I've said I know is probably not strategic, but it's the day-to-day trying to keep my chair looking good and the board appearing functional and working well in the public eye, because I think that brings greater comfort to all the staff and to the educational community.
So I'm hearing a lot of almost that having each other's backs and just making sure that when there are differences, it's just between the two of you, not in front of others. Going back to the whole issue as well of strong communication. So I want to take it one step further, and I'm going to ask you for advice. And I want to ask the directors first. All right. So I want you to pretend that you've been invited by trustees to advise them on what you would consider the characteristics of an ideal board chair to be. What would you tell them and why? So this is a board that's actually not going to do the beauty contest. This is a board that is going to go through a process that was described to us this morning, and they want your advice. Edith.
Alors là, j'ai pris le temps quand même d'écrire ma réponse puisqu'on me demanderait officiellement la personne idéale avec laquelle j'aimerais travailler. Et je ne suis pas une directrice de l'éducation difficile, je pense. Mais ça se résume peut-être à 3 enjeux sur lesquels j'aimerais qu'on ait une entière complicité. Certainement une communication qui est fréquente, mais directe. Alors, la présidence, mon numéro de téléphone, des textos, des courriels et des rencontres hebdomadaires à toutes les semaines. Et également, dans cette communication-là, qui est constante avec la directrice de l'éducation, qu'on utilise ensemble nos surintendants comme étant des experts de contenu qui peuvent nous éclairer sur certains sujets pour lesquels je n'ai parfois pas toujours toutes les réponses. Alors, j'apprécie énormément le fait que la vice-présidence communique, la vice-présidence et la présidente, parce que nous travaillons vraiment à 3, que la communication soit constante vis-à-vis la direction de l'éducation. Je me sens mieux aiguillée ensuite pour faire face soit à un public, faire face à mes propres gestionnaires ou devant les autres conseillers scolaires. L'autre chose, c'est les relations avec les médias. Ce sont des sujets qu'on doit aborder concrètement. Alors, chez nous, la culture de l'organisation, c'est si, par exemple, le sujet est hautement pédagogique. Alors, j'ai de la chance, ça m'arrive de prendre la parole devant les médias parce que j'aime bien ça. Alors, je suis heureuse d'avoir une présidente qui va dire « ça, c'est vraiment pédagogique, Édith, alors tu vas devant la télévision ou tu vas devant les médias et puis tu donnes toute l'expertise pédagogique dont le conseil scolaire est si fier. » D'autre part, dès que le sujet est politique, évidemment que nos services des communications vont être au service de notre présidence qui va prendre la parole sur des enjeux qui sont politiques. La dernière chose, j'aime beaucoup le fait qu'on s'entende sur l'idée que dès qu'on se retrouve devant un public, on est une seule voix. Par exemple, des parents qui vont téléphoner à un conseiller scolaire ou un conseil d'école qui va téléphoner à un conseiller scolaire pour dire « on aimerait vous inviter pour nous parler des réalités de notre communauté scolaire ». On a toujours le réflexe, de part et d'autre, d'être 2 ou 3 gestionnaires. Comme ça, la présidence, avec la haute gestion, qui peut être moi ou un surintendant, de dégager l'image qu'on est une équipe, qu'on travaille ensemble de façon concertée pour le bien-être des communautés scolaires. Alors, je dirais que, présentement, je suis une directrice de l'éducation comblée. Merci.
So what I'm hearing then, that advice you'd be giving is, sorry, I'm getting French coming through as I'm speaking English. Whew. And I was saying, yes. So what I'm hearing you say then, that advice is, A, you're looking for really the ability of someone to communicate openly, to be really trusting in that relationship. The other thing, I was interested in what you said about media, because not only a willingness to share the platform, but obviously someone who's able to speak to the media is what I hear. And I'm going to the third, oh, go ahead.
Je pourrais peut-être même ajouter sur ce point spécifiquement que, par exemple, on partage des messages communs. J'ai dans ma poche 4 ou 5 déclarations. Madame Savard a aussi les 4 ou 5 mêmes déclarations et peu importe où nous nous trouvons, nous avons quand même un minimum de messages communs et ça nous rend service énormément. Alors, mais ce sont des sujets qu'on doit aborder très concrètement, assis autour d'une table et déterminer ce qu'on va dire, à qui on va le dire et comment on va le dire. Alors, je pense que la communication, quand on entre en fonction, ce n'est pas une option. La confiance, elle va s'établir en lien avec la qualité de la communication. Mais oui.
Okay, excellent, excellent. And that notion of, I always think in terms of when we enter into that relationship, a little bit of setting my own ego aside because it becomes a we. Yeah, Martha, what would you add to that? What advice would you provide those trustees?
Okay. I'm hoping that chairs and vice chairs see themselves in this. We've talked a lot about communication skills today. I think it's very important for the trustees to pick someone to be chair who's a good listener, but also, much as my colleague has said, articulate, so that person should be able to speak to all stakeholders, including the media. I would hope that the chair would be respectful of all opinions, including opinions which differ from the chair's, which gets to that issue of it not being ego. I'm hoping that all of you sitting here and the chairs of the future are tolerant, patient, and polite, and can engage in thoughtful planning and be a team leader. Focus on board relationships and cohesion, and take steps to ensure that there is a positive climate in the boardroom. I am hoping that the chair would always be courteous and be able to respectfully conclude a conversation, especially if there be conversations, let's say in the boardroom, that wander off topic, are out of order, or occasionally could get hostile, that the chair can conclude the conversation in a respectful and polite way. I think this is very important, that the chair is supportive of trustee colleagues, both in public and in private, and that the chair doesn't get out of the boardroom and then say uncomplimentary things about other trustees. It is a very small province, and when people make negative comments about one another, and that includes directors about trustees or anything like that, invariably it gets back to people. So it's very important for the chair to set a good example and be very positive. Hopefully the chair, and it was mentioned this morning, will be a hard worker. I don't know whether a chair can actually do 5 times the work of a regular trustee, but the chair does have to be a hard worker and dependable and reliable. So if the chair says that he or she is meeting you at 5 o'clock, that you're not still sitting there at 7:15. I would hope that the chair has the respect of other trustees and the senior staff, as well as the departments and the staff and the union leadership. I think it's quite important for, people don't always have to agree with the chair, but I think it's very important that there would be respect.
There would be respect. Be interesting to take your 2 lists and to be able to transfer them into something that a group of trustees could use through that discernment process in selecting. Now, I want to flip where the advice comes from and what the advice is about. So this time, my question is to chairs. So my question is this: I want you to pretend that your colleagues at another board came to you as they began their search for a new director. They wanted to know what you thought the characteristics of an ideal director of education were relative to how that person worked with the board. So again, what would you tell them and why? Why would you select that? Joanne?
Pour commencer, Dominique me fait un peu peur tantôt, lorsqu'il nous a tous demandé de se lever. Et lorsque c'est le choix de directeur de l'éducation, parce que nous, on vient juste de vivre ça et on a notre cher Régent Sirois, qui est notre nouveau directeur depuis quelques mois. Et lorsqu'il a dit, est-ce que vous avez pris une firme pour la recherche? Nous, oui, on a pris une firme, mais pas parce qu'on a pris une firme qu'on n'était pas impliqué. Donc, la sélection du directeur d'éducation, une chose que je voudrais dire à tout le monde, c'est le choix du conseil. C'est le choix de chacun des conseillers scolaires. Donc, on a impliqué une firme, on a demandé les genres de questions qu'on voulait avoir pour commencer et qu'est-ce qu'on recherchait dans un directeur d'éducation. Et pour nous, l'importance dans notre conseil, et je crois qu'il est important pour tout le monde, c'est encore la question, oui, on en parle tantôt, le respect de travailler avec chacun des conseillers scolaires. Chaque conseiller scolaire est différent, donc de connaître chacun des conseillers scolaires à leur façon. La communication, c'est important pour nous également, de bien communiquer avec les conseillers scolaires, de bien communiquer l'information de son équipe de gestion aux conseillers scolaires, s'assurer qu'on a la bonne information. Je pense tout le côté des médias également, c'est très important de pouvoir avoir un directeur d'éducation qui est capable de parler aux médias, de transmettre la bonne information, de faire le bon image que l'on veut du conseil. Pour nous, c'était la créativité aussi également. On ne veut pas un directeur d'éducation qui fait juste planer. Il y a des choses qui fonctionnent bien, mais je pense que c'est important que la créativité, que la proactivité également, proactif, c'était très important pour nous. Puis je pense aussi, quelqu'un, si je peux apporter un point de vue, c'est d'avoir un directeur d'éducation qui est proche de son monde, donc autant du côté de sa gestion, de son équipe, qu'il soit un coach, qu'il soit un leader pour eux, mais également que le directeur d'éducation soit proche de sa communauté, que ce soit une personne qui est proche des enfants, qui soit proche des enseignants, qui soit proche des parents. Donc, d'avoir peut-être pied sur terre. Et souvent, c'est le processus de sa carrière qui va nous démontrer ceci. Mais je pense que cet élément-là, il ne faut pas oublier que nous sommes tous humains. Nous avons tous une façon de faire. Nous avons tous une façon de travailler avec les gens également. Mais il ne faut pas oublier les enfants, il ne faut pas oublier les parents, il ne faut pas oublier la communauté, il ne faut pas oublier les organismes avec qui on travaille. Donc, je pense que cette relation-là que notre directeur peut établir est très importante. Donc, ceux-là sont quelques-uns des points, mais on en avait peut-être une cinquantaine, là, mais ça, c'est ceux que je pense sont les plus importants.
Oh, 50. Wow. Sick.
Alors, félicitations.
All right. Bill, what about, how would you answer that question? What would you be looking for relative to working with the board?
Exactly. And I think that, you know, I go along with what Dominic said this morning about being an expert on this. I don't proclaim to be an expert on this by any means, believe me. But one of the things that I think I would say if another board came to me, we've done this, I'm going to say I've gone through, I've worked with, yeah, here we go. Yes, there's a good word. I've suffered through. I'm getting there. 5 directors and 2 interim directors. And we've done it a number of different ways. I've been on boards where trustees alone have made that decision, and they've done it on their own. I've been on boards where you would take an outside firm, and they would do a search for you, and then that's how you would maybe come up with your next director. In talking with our board this time, we were looking for a director a couple of years ago, and we wanted to go a different direction. We wanted to actually see what the community thought. What is the view of our particular district school board? Yeah. And so what we did was we gathered together a number of questions that we were looking for that we thought we'd like to hear from the community about. And so we put it out there, what challenges would this board be facing in the next 5 years? What would you expect from the new director of education? What skills, qualifications, competencies, personal leadership would the new director need to possess to be successful? So then what we did was we put out an electronic survey. We put it out to all of our partner groups. We put it out to, we had focus groups. We gathered together. We dealt with our unions. Wow. We brought those people in, our school councils, our students, our student senates. We met with them. We met with the diocese. It was important for us to get a full view of where this board, they saw this board going in the next 5 years, so that we had a strategic plan in place that was going to be acceptable to this board and this community. So based on what we heard back, and some of the characteristics that we heard back from the community were the following: like, they had to be a people person, they had to be respectful, they had to be trusted, they had to demonstrate Catholic leadership, they had to be good listeners, effective communicators, open, strong emotional intelligence, sense of humor. Believe me, on that board, our board, that's important.
Since you suffered through all those
Yeah,
years.
that's right. Yeah, absolutely. So that was actually a very good one. A cultivator of relationships and able to get people engaged. And those were the key things that we heard back from our community. And so what we did was we based our ad on those things. And in our ad, that's exactly what we were looking for. And so when it came back to the trustees, and we had to actually do the interviews and things like that, we were looking for a person that filled those qualifications and that was going to do, student achievement was huge too, by the way. And so we were looking for someone who could really help us with student achievement and be all of those things. Now, mind you, we didn't expect someone to be absolutely perfect, but we came close, actually. I'm trying to be nice to the director now, but I'm not usually this nice to her. But no, absolutely, yeah. So, but no, I mean, I think that we did absolutely do the right thing, in that, as far as the community was concerned, they were involved. They were part of making this decision, and they're very happy with what we've come up with. And so they're pleased with the new director, as we are, and so that's, you know, we've done our job.
So that sounds to me much like what we heard this morning, which is the strategic issue, making it also the stakeholders' strategic issue.
Absolutely.
That's an excellent process. Kathy, what would you add?
So
Tough act to follow, but
well,
yeah,
I know.
Yeah.
So I've been through 2 director searches as a trustee. So I'm a baby at this. I've only been two. I would say this: you absolutely need to be looking for somebody that demonstrates integrity, and that walks the talk and talks the walk. Like you have to depend on the person that's leading your board to be the leader of your board. And if you can't depend on them to put that face on public education, because as much as it's our role, it's theirs too, to put that face on public education, then they probably shouldn't be your director. It's really, really important to me that when the director is on the news, and usually it's not about something pleasant, unfortunately, they never really call up and say, I hear that things are really going well. And we really would like to talk to you about how well things are going. They never do that. They always call you and say, oh, so you're closing the only important school in the entire world. And we want to talk to you about how terrible you are. So what do you have to say? And I want the person who's that person in front of that mic to represent us well, and to put a human face to it. And I think there's also a big piece about being honest. Hard truth is sometimes the most important truth. And I think that it's important that your director be able to sit you down and say, okay, this might not be so smart, and mean it and be honest and be able to back it up and tell you why. And the other thing I want to say, and it sounds very trite, but I think it's really interesting to see how your director is with kids in a school. And if you, because after all, I know it is really, we all are here about the kids. I mean, if anybody doesn't say that, then really, what are you here for? Because this is, God knows we as trustees, we're not getting rich. We're not, we're not monetarily. I'm rich in all kinds of other ways, but, we have to be doing this because you have a passion, and you care, and you're committed to the future of everybody. Because if we mess this up, it messes it up for the whole everybody, right? And so it's interesting to me, and Rusty didn't know I was going to say this, but I like watching him with little kids in schools, because he gets that part. He gets how important that kids are, and that important role that they should be playing in everything we're thinking.
That's excellent. Do you know, the term, the 21st century director, 21st century leader came up a couple of times this morning. And I think that these are important questions because the way we go about selecting our leaders, and really directors of education, chairs of boards, vice chairs, really we are leaders within those systems. That, we are called to far more. And need to be far wiser in that, in the way in which we go about doing that. So I think that it's an important, I'm sure that a lot of people have gotten some very interesting ideas about how individually you've gone about that. Now, despite the fact that, we know that the relationship between both director and the chair is important, the reality is there are times when we disagree. When there are differences. So what I'd like you to do, and by the way, everybody, I cautioned them that I had wanted people to be as honest as they could be so that we could all learn, but this is being recorded, so there's an element of discretion that will be applied to their answers. But my question is this: how have you managed a situation where there were differences of opinion between yourselves as chair and director, or even between the board and staff? So, I'm curious, Edith, would you mind addressing that?
C'est jamais arrivé. Non, c'est pas vrai. C'est des choses qui arrivent, mais je pense que ce qui est le plus important du point de vue de la direction de l'éducation, c'est de faire la distinction entre ce qui m'apparaît juste. Moi aussi, j'ai des opinions. Moi aussi, j'ai une vision sur certains dossiers. Alors, c'est d'être capable, ensemble, la gestion et les conseillers scolaires, de faire fi, et je dirais davantage la gestion, faire fi de ses opinions ou de sa vision dans quelque dossier que ce soit. Et je trouve qu'à ce moment-là, mon rôle devient essentiel sur la quantité et la qualité des informations que je vais fournir aux conseillers scolaires pour qu'eux puissent prendre une décision éclairée. Alors, je pense que c'est des moments où on doit travailler très fort à donner le plus d'informations possible sur un dossier sur lequel on pourrait avoir un litige ou sur lequel on ne s'entend pas sur la façon de le mettre en œuvre ou tout simplement mettre quelque chose en œuvre ou ne pas le mettre en œuvre. Alors, c'est de fournir le maximum d'informations pour que notre présidence, avec ses collègues, puisse prendre la meilleure décision. Mais encore une fois, c'est là que je répète que la qualité de la communication, ce n'est pas une option, même quand on entre en fonction comme président ou comme direction de l'éducation. Il faut tout de suite s'investir sur une structure de communication qui est rigoureuse, régulière, j'ai beaucoup aimé ce que Martha a dit tout à l'heure, d'adapter en fonction des gens avec qui on travaille, comment on va communiquer ensemble. Mais ça, ce n'est pas une option parce que dans des moments critiques comme ça, c'est là qu'on va voir à quel point la communication est essentielle.
Okay. Yeah. Martha, what about you? Do you have anything to add to that? Could you share any thoughts?
Yeah, I do. I've been a director for 21 years now, and I have not had a significant difference of opinion with a board chair. We have had 5 board chairs that I've had the pleasure of working with.
And that's why Martha's a good director of education.
And there have been a couple of situations where the chair and I together had a difference of opinion with the vice chair. So I'll give you, I've got a couple of, if it's all right to give 2 examples.
Please.
Okay, we're an amalgamated board, and very early into the amalgamation, we had a vice chair from one side of the board who rushed a property sale through the board by virtue of arranging a special board meeting that he insisted that the chair do. It was against the advice of the chair, and it was based on one property appraisal done by a company in Toronto for a property in Guelph. And the chair disagreed with this, but the superintendent and the vice chair arranged for this to happen. I called him up the night before to explain to him the reasons that I thought this was not a good idea. I did not prevail, and it went through. We ended up selling a school for $127,000. which is a very low amount. I know it's not Toronto to you Toronto folks right in front of me, but a school fetches much more than that, even in Guelph. So it went through. The board was attacked in the media, in the local Guelph Mercury, which just finished last Friday.
Yes.
There were 127 letters to the editor, and every time the trustees went out for an election for the next 10 years, they heard about it at the door. So it was very difficult for the chair and for me. It damaged relationships within the board for a very long time. So what did we do?
Yes.
I tried to maintain a professional demeanor. I publicly supported the board's decision because that is what I had to do, and it's what the board chair has to do. And the poor board chair, who had fought against it, had to walk out of the door and support the board's decision. What we did was we hired an outside consultant to review our processes. We changed our processes, and something like that didn't happen again.
Excellent.
So it doesn't always work out well, but it was the best that we could do, the chair and I, under a difficult situation. And sometimes the people in this room have those kinds of difficult situations. The other one, which I'll just refer to briefly,
Sure.
relates to an accommodation review. We had a couple of them. One was a school closure, and one was a larger review where there was an intent to close at the June board meeting, and the trustees were lobbied over the summer and changed their vote in August. So what did we do, which is similar to what Edith is talking about? We made sure that the board reports were factual and accurate, and we had no lobbying of trustees, so all the staff had to remain neutral. I made sure the staff did not get emotionally involved. It is a board decision, not the staff's decision. I made sure the staff did not take sides in the debate. I made sure the information was sent to all trustees so there would be transparency and no favoritism. We presented publicly and professionally. The decisions did end up causing trouble for the board, so I waited for 2 or 3 years and then got it fixed quietly so that no trustees would be humiliated. And one of them caused, it was a small little school, caused a problem, so there would be what I call triple splits. There would be 3 grades in one class. I augmented the staffing for the school so children did not have to pay for the result of what the decision had been. So my only point, Marion, is that sometimes it's not a fairy tale. Sometimes the decisions don't work out the way that you want, but it's that you've got the lemon and you make the lemonade, you do the very best you can to make sure that it publicly presents positively.
Again, that's what I was going to say. So I'm hearing again that public face versus what happens in the background. I have a final question that I'm hoping I can open to all of you. I was actually reading an article last week. And so the article was describing the relationship between board chairs and CEOs, or in our case, the directors of education would be the equivalent. And it was describing relationships as falling along a continuum from okay to good to great. And it got me interested, and so I'd like to hear from each of you, if you'd be willing to. How would you describe the difference? Ignore the middle one. How would you describe the difference in the relationship between board chair and director, the difference between okay and absolutely great? What would be the differentiating factors for you? Anybody? Bill, can you think about that?
Not particularly, but certainly wasn't one of the questions at the top of my list. But I mean, it's really one you have to think about because going from okay to great and kind of leaving out that middle ground, that's really a hard thing to talk about. I mean, I think
I didn't want to give you an easy question.
Well, no, it's tough. You've given us a good one here. But I think that it all depends, and I think it goes back to the relationship between the chair and the director. I think that that's key, and it sets the tone for the entire board. So when I sat down and started to think about this, I started to think about what that would be from okay to great. Like, for instance, because this would now trickle down to the board. Because you would think that, whatever is okay, and the difference between okay and great would be have a trickling down effect to the board. So I thought that one of the things you could say okay about is knowing each other's roles. But it would be great if you understood each other's roles, evident in handling, which is evident in the way that you handle issues.
Great. Yeah.
Okay, I said that I thought it might be okay working on separate agendas, and that can happen sometimes, but it would be great if you work together in the best interest of the system. I thought it would be okay to be reactive, but I thought it would be great to be proactive.
Oh, excellent.
I thought it would be okay to know the vision and the strategic priorities of your board, like formal board meetings, things like that. But then I thought it would be great to have a shared vision and strategies to address priorities, to discuss at a committee level with a greater understanding as how that would affect the board as well.
Excellent.
It would be okay to have less than high levels of trust and respect. That could be okay. But it would be great to have high levels of trust and respect. You could get by with okay, but it would be great to have the other. And it would be okay knowing each other's roles, and as chairs, we do. We know each other's roles. We know where we stand. We know the governance issues as well. But then I thought it would be great if we had a shared understanding of each other's roles. We knew exactly what we shared and where those roles stood.
Wow, for not being prepared, that's pretty good.
Well, you know, I didn't have anything to do on the weekend. Actually, I was thinking about writing a book. I was actually going to call it the Reflections on Being a Great Chair. And then I was going to sell 200 copies to my own board, but...
And on that,
and then I'll put it out for sale. Then I'll put it out for sale to the rest of you. There you go.
And on that, either, do you have some ideas to share on it?
Maybe one more.
Good. You want some books?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
OK. J'ai parlé de la communication ouverte et structurée. Ça, c'est OK. J'ai parlé des fonctions de représentation, chacun dans nos rôles. Ça, c'est OK. Pour moi, c'est non négociable. On doit agir de cette façon-là. Ce qui est vraiment à un très haut niveau maintenant pour moi. Ça fait seulement 4 ans que je suis directrice de l'éducation. On a un conseil scolaire qui est très jeune, 17 ans d'expérience, c'est pas beaucoup. Ce qui est vraiment sharp maintenant, c'est d'avoir une planification stratégique alignée avec mon entente de rendement. Ça nous amène comme table politique et comme gestion, même ça facilite mon travail avec mes gestionnaires. Mais c'est beaucoup de travail. C'est beaucoup de travail pour les conseillers scolaires et ce fut beaucoup de travail pour la directrice de l'éducation et les surintendants et les directions des départements. Mais ça, c'est être proactif. Le mariage entre la planification stratégique et mon entente de rendement, on l'a fait à la sueur de notre front. Ça a pris presque 1 année et demie. Mais maintenant que c'est fait, pour moi, là, il y a de la magie. On se sent beaucoup plus efficient et je sens toute la gestion et la table politique à un niveau beaucoup plus stratégique. Alors, moi, je pense que j'ai beaucoup de plaisir à faire mon travail. Il faudrait que je pose la question aux autres, mais présentement, j'ai énormément de plaisir à faire mon travail.
I love the term magic. I love the term magic. Anybody else want to address? Yeah, go ahead, Cass.
Thinking about what my friend here was saying, I might buy your book. Because
You get a discount.
well, you know, you have so much more experience than I thought, you know. But one of the things I think is important, all of the things you've said are very important, but I also think it's the anticipation of need. So I always think about oftentimes when we're sitting at our board meeting and, you know, you're sitting at the head of the table and the director's sitting to my left and things are happening at the meeting and I'm, you know, it's like directing traffic sometimes at a board meeting, right? It's not so much about, you know, one thing about being chair is you give up that right to be really mouthy at the board table. And you give up, you know, and for those who know me, that might have been important at one time in my life. And you give up that right to have a comment and an opinion on absolutely everything before the table. You give that up because now my job is to chair the board.
Yeah.
And so there are often times when things are happening and sometimes things happen quickly and the director's furiously taking notes and I'm taking notes and we talk afterwards and he'll say, well, I think you're going to want more information than this. And I say, I think that this needs to happen. And And it's that sharing, that anticipating of anticipation of what each other needs to be able to do our job better. And again, it comes down to that trust piece that, like, I know what his job, I don't know what his job is, and, I don't want to do his job. Like, it's more than my job, it's bigger. And, but I know what he has to do, and he knows what I have to do, and we try to work together to make it happen. And so that's anticipating the needs of the other person.
Exciting.
Yeah,
what I'm
and
hearing is a
it
lot of
is.
excitement when you just talk about that.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, Joanne.
Just to let you know, Bill, I bought your book already.
Was it any good?
And it's excellent, so.
Thank you.
Mais sérieusement, je vois beaucoup la relation un peu comme un mariage également. Un début de mariage, tu sais, c'est OK, il y a l'amour, ici, on apprend à se connaître, on apprend à savoir comment se lire dans la tête, etc. Puis quand ça devient great, quand ça devient super, bien, c'est qu'on devient quasiment un. Donc, on devient pratiquement une unité où on peut se comprendre tout de suite, où le directeur va, Joanne, elle va penser comme ci, moi, je veux dire, bien, Régent va penser comme ceci. Des fois, se finir les phrases, des fois, parce qu'on s'entend sur la même chose. Donc, je pense que c'est une évolution de OK à great, comme on disait tantôt. Je pense que c'est cette évolution-là qui est importante, puis arriver à une confiance absolue, pratiquement. Parce que si on n'a pas cette confiance-là avec le directeur et vice-versa, on ne pourra pas accomplir les choses qu'on veut faire. Donc, je voulais juste ajouter ce petit point de vue-là.
And it's discouraging.
Ouais.
It's discouraging,
Ouais.
absolutely. Martha, I'm going to give you last word. Anything briefly you'd like to add to that's new?
No, only one thing that you had asked us to think about. You said, okay, you've got relationships that are okay or good or great, and after the length of time I've been there, I've had all three. And you asked if it mattered.
Oh, if I mattered, absolutely.
Yeah, you asked, does this matter, which it is? And I think it really does matter. I think it matters to the board. I think it matters to the senior staff, and I think it matters to the system. Mm-hmm. I think if the relationship is good, and I just have two brief things to say, I think everybody looks to the board office. If the chair and the director get along well, that's great. And if the trustees and the senior admin get along, then there's a sort of a sigh of relief and a calm and a comfort that it's all good there in the boardroom. And it filters down through the departments and into the schools. People can't be the best that they can be if they're nervous or looking over their shoulders. If they look up and they see the suits or the suits and the trustees are squabbling with one another, then they don't know if that superintendent or director who comes into their school and says X, whether that's going to hold 6 months from now, because it may be overturned. So I think it matters to the whole system that the relationship is great. I think it really matters. You've done talking here about characteristics of a new director, and at our professional education symposium, the English public sector talked about selecting a new director a week ago at one of their sessions. I think it really matters to a new director. I think there are many things that a new director may not know, and it's not about the content, the operational content, it's about the politics of the boardroom. And it's about the things in the background that influence the decision-making that a new person may not know. And if you have a great relationship with the board chair, that will make it much easier for the new director because that board chair can be the mentor with regard to the politics of the boardroom, so the board director does not blunder within the first month or two and not have those quick wins that were mentioned. To me, all this many years later, it really matters. I think the support and the wisdom from the board chair is very important. I think being the CEO of any organization is challenging, but if the political and the staff arms of the board are working together, I think there's going to be a much more positive atmosphere, and I think that's to the betterment of the whole of the system.
Well, and you know what? Thank you very much for bringing back and reminding me about the part that it matters. I think that's a wonderful way to wrap this up, but it really does reinforce, what we've been talking about all day. Again, on behalf of everyone, thank you. You've been absolutely wonderful. You've had wonderful ideas, great insight. It is not always the easiest to come and sit in front of your peers and to be as honest and as helpful. And so on behalf of everyone, I just thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.